My name is Dan Gjelten. I'm director of the UST Libraries, and I welcome you to this event on the front porch of O'Shaughnessy Frye Library. This is one of the highlights of my year. We're coming to the end of National Poetry Month now. It's the month of April every year, and this is the way that we have chosen to schedule or to honor this month. For those of you who may be attending this event for the first time, let me tell you just a little bit about it. In 1997, the then poet laureate of the United States, Robert Pinsky, started what he called the Favorite Poem Project, and Pinsky believed that poetry is, and he probably still does believe this, that poetry is a vocal art. It's a form that's meant to be heard. He wrote, if a poem is written well, it was written with the poet's voice and for a voice. Reading a poem silently instead of saying a poem is like the difference between staring at sheet music and actually humming or playing the music on an instrument. So the Favorite Poem Project was designed to get Americans to stand up and read the poems that they love. It's not really a day to read your own poetry. We should probably have a day for that too, but this is a day to read the poems that have changed you and have made a difference in your own life. Our goal each year is to get readers from all walks of life to stand up and read poems. This is a poetry potluck, and it has some of the magic and the mystery of potlucks in that while we do not tell people what to read or how long to read, there's always sort of like a good mix between vegetables and dessert and so forth. It just happens. I don't know how that works out. And over the years, we've had 49, the last 4 years, not counting this year, we've had 49 different people from the UST community stand up and read poems. So we're very happy about that. I was just thinking and talking to somebody that maybe we should make a list of all the poems that have been read. We should do that and put it on the web. So I think that'd be an interesting list. Let's see. I want to thank Julie Kimlinger. She did a great job drafting readers this year. And this year is notable for the number of vice presidents we have reading. The number's never been so high. We're going to keep striving higher and higher each year. And then also thanks to Ron Riley and John Faith, who set us up actually twice this morning. I won't say any more about that, but we really appreciate them. There are a couple of changes in the program. Linda Hulbert, our Associate Director for Technical Services, is ill today, and her poem is going to be read by Lynn Randazzo. I really appreciate Lynn stepping in to do that. It's a great poem. And then Michelle Filkins from the Keffer Library is going to read a poem at the end of the program, which is not listed. What we usually do is have you just come up to the podium in the order in which you are listed on the program, tell us your name, what you do at St. Thomas, and then tell us a little bit about the poem and why this poem is important to you. We generally don't repeat readers. It was one of the perks of my job is I get to read every year, and this really makes me happy. It's one of those intangible benefits of working at St. Thomas, I guess. So I'm very happy to be, I'm going to read the first poem. And what I'm going to do is read a poem by Marge Piercy. This is from a brand new book of hers called Colors Passing Through Us. And the name of the poem is Rising in Perilous Hope. I like this poem. I think it's apropos for sort of the moment in our history, and it's a good poem about the healing power of poetry. What can I hold in my hands this morning that will not flow through my fingers? What words can I say that will catch in your mind like burrs, chiggers that burrow? If my touch could heal, I would lay my hands on your bent head and bellow prayers. If my words could change the weather or the government or the way the world twists and guts us, fast or slow, what could I do but what I do now? I fit words together and say them. It is a given like the color of my eyes. I hope it makes a small difference, as I hope the drought will break and the morning come rising out of the ocean, wearing a cloak of clean, sweet mist and swirling turns. Sam.
Day. I may be one of the few people in the country during this festival time reading a poem in a suit. Not typical attire for poetry readings. The selection that I made is Degrees of Grey in Phillipsburg by Richard Hugo. Dick Hugo was one of a group of poets who basically were bounded by having been born in the 1920s, and many of them served in the Second World War. Names like Randall Jarrell, James Wright, Theodore Retke, and others come to mind. I try not to intellectualize my own view of what I read or what I select. Rather, I think poetry for me is, it was Ezra Pound who said that it's language charged with the ultimate meaning. I prefer to feel it rather than to think about it a whole lot. At any rate, Degrees of Grey in Phillipsburg by Richard Hugo. You might come here Sunday on a whim. Say your life broke down. The last good kiss you had was years ago. You walk these streets laid out by the insane, past hotels that didn't last, bars that did, the tortured try of local drivers to accelerate their lives. Only churches are kept up. The jail turned 70 this year. The only prisoner is always in, not knowing what he's done. The principal supporting business now is rage. Hatred of the various grays the mountain sends, hatred of the mill, the silver bill repeal, the best-liked girls who leave each year for Butte. One good restaurant and bars can't wipe the boredom out. The 1907 boom, 8 going silver mines, a dance floor built on springs. All memory resolves itself in gaze. In panoramic green, you know the cattle eat, and 2 stacks high above the town. 2 dead kilns. The huge mill in collapse for 50 years that won't fall finally down. Isn't this your life? The ancient kiss still burning out your eyes? Isn't this defeat so accurate? The church bell simply seems a pure announcement. Ring, and no one comes. Don't empty houses ring? Are magnesium and scorn sufficient to support a town? Not just Phillipsburg, but towns of towering blondes, good jazz, and booze the world will never let you have until the town you came from dies inside. Say no to yourself. The old man, 20 when the jail was built, still laughs, although his lips collapse. Someday soon, he says, I'll go to sleep and not wake up. You tell him no. You're talking to yourself. The car that brought you here still runs. The money you buy lunch with, no matter where it's mined, is silver. And the girl who serves your food is slender, and her red hair lights the wall.
I'm Mark Neuzil, and I'm a teacher here, and I'm going to read The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, which is a selection I made because I didn't think anybody else would pick a historical poem, and I like it. And Longfellow wrote this on the eve of the Civil War, and when we were putting this together, it was on the eve of another war, and we were thinking about that. I'm not going to read the whole thing because we'd be getting Paul de Concord about supper time. I wanted to leave time for others, but I'm going to read the first few lines anyway. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, if the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light. 1 if by land and 2 if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be, ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm for the country folk to be up and to arm. Then he said good night, and with muffled oar silently rowed to the Charlestown shore Just as the moon rose over the bay, where swinging wide at her moorings lay the Somerset British man-of-war, a phantom ship with each mast and spar across the moon like a prison bar, and a large black hulk that was magnified by its own reflection in the tide. Meanwhile, his friend through alley and street wanders and watches with eager ears, till in the silence around him he hears the muster of men at the barrack door, the sound of arms and the tramp of feet, and the measured tread of the grenadiers marching down to their boats on the shore. We now move ahead in our program. You know the rest in the books you have read, how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball from behind each fence and farmyard wall, chasing the redcoats down the lane, then crossing the fields to emerge again, under the trees, at the turn of the road, and only pausing to fire and load. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm. A cry of defiance and not of fear, a voice in the darkness, a knock at the door, and a word that shall echo forevermore. For, borne on the night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will awaken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere. Thank you.
I'm Elizabeth Dussol from Academic Counseling, and I knew I wanted to do a poem by Wilfred Owen. And to give you an introduction to Wilfred Owen, I'm going to read you something Dylan Thomas wrote in 1946, and it's in a collection of his called Quite Early One Morning. He says, Wilfred Owen was born in 1893 and killed in 1918. 25 years of age, he was the greatest poet of the First Great War. Perhaps, in the future, if there are men then still to read, by which I mean if there are men at all, he may be regarded as one of the great poets of all wars. But only war itself can resolve the problem of the ultimate truth of his or of anyone else's poetry, war or its cessation. And this time, when in the words of an American critic, the audiences of the earth, witnessing what may well be the last act of their own tragedy, insist upon chief actors who are senseless enough to perform a cataclysm, the voice of the poetry of Wilfred Owen speaks to us down the revolving stages of 30 years with terrible new significance and strength. We had not forgotten his poetry, but perhaps we had allowed ourselves to think of it as the voice of one particular time, one place, one war. Now, at the beginning of what in the future may never be known to historians as the atomic age, for obvious reasons, there may be no historians, we can see, rereading Owen, that he is a poet of all times, all places, and all wars. There is only one war, that of men against men. And the poem of Wilfred Owen's that I want to share with you is called The Parable of the Old Men and the Young. So Abram rose and clave the wood and went, and took the fire with him and a knife. And as they journeyed both of them together, Isaac the firstborn spake and said, My father, behold the preparations, fire and iron. But where is the lamb for this burnt offering? Then Abram bound the youth with belts and straps, and builded parapets and trenches there, and stretched forth the knife to kill his son. When lo, an angel called him out of heaven, saying, Lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do anything to him. Behold, a ram, caught in a thicket by its horns. Offer the ram of pride instead of him. But the old man would not do so, but slew his son, and half the seed of Europe, one by one.
Good afternoon. My name is Carlos, and I work with Public Safety Department. And the last time I read a poem was in French. Today I'm going to do it in my native language, which is Spanish. And I'll read it in English as well. The poem is Sonnet 116 by William Shakespeare. Permitidme que no reconozca impedimentos a la unión de unas almas fieles. No es amor el que cambia al advertir un cambio o que tiende a distanciarse con el distanciado. Oh no, es un mojón inmutable que soporta las tempestades y nunca se bambolea. Es la estrella para el barco sin rumbo, cuya virtud se desconoce aunque se tome su altura. El amor no es un bufón del tiempo, aunque su doblada guadaña amenaza los labios y las mejillas de rosa. El amor no se altera con las horas y las semanas rápidas, sino que perdura hasta el fin de los tiempos. Si este es un error que pueda imputárseme, yo no he escrito nunca, ni amó jamás hombre alguno. Now in English. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is a never fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose war's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error, and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lynn Randazzo, and this poem I'm about to read was selected by Linda Hulbert, who works in the library here with me, and I agreed to read the poem because it's a nice one. It's written by e.e.cummings, and it's I also have an emotional response to it. It's I too am very enthusiastic about the spring and weather being good and winter being over, so I enjoy it. I thank you, God, for most this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirit of trees and a blue true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I who have died am alive again today, and this is the sun's birthday. This is the birthday of life and of love and wings, and of the gay, great happening, illimitably earth. How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any lifted from the no of all nothing, human, merely being, doubt unimaginable you? Now the ears of my ears awake, now the eyes of my eyes are opened. Thanks.
My name is Scott Swanson. I'm the director of the academic support program at the law school. I have tenuous connections to poetry, but I was intrigued by this, and it struck me as when I was trying to find a poem to read that this is another area like music for me where I can go to try to express some things that are somewhere within me. One of the things that had been bothering me at the law school was the student groups talking about the war as it was coming and as it was being waged. On the one hand, the groups, the studentsforwar.com, who don't seem to quite understand what war is, and the folks on the other side who don't understand what tyranny is. So I didn't really know where to go, and I was looking at the New Yorker, which I knew was a source of poetry, and found this poem which seemed to express at least one of the feelings I had about this. Before the War by Philip Levine. Seeing his mother coming home, he kneels behind a parked car, one hand over his mouth to still his breathing. She passes, climbs the stairs, and again the street is his. We're in an American city, Toledo, sometime in the last century, though it could be Buffalo or Flint. The places are the same except for the names. At 8 or 9, even at 11, kids are the same. Without an identity, without a soul. Things with bad teeth and bad clothes. We could give them names. We could name them Mother Gertrude and give her a small office job, typing bills of lading 8 hours a day, 5.5 days a week. We could give her dreams of marriage to the boss, who's already married, but we don't because she loathes him. It's her son, Saul, she loves, the one still hiding with one knee down on the concrete, drawing the day's last heat. He's got feelings. Young as he is, he can feel heat, cold, pain, just as a dog would. And like a dog, he'll answer to his name. Go ahead, call him. Hey, Solly boy, come here. He doesn't bark. He doesn't sit. He doesn't beg or extend one paw in a gesture of submission. He accepts his whole name. Even as a kid, he stands and faces us. Just as, 11 years from now, he'll stand and face his death flaming toward him on a bridgehead at Remagen, while Gertrude goes on typing mechanically into the falling winter night.
Okay, I'm Michael Andregg, and I'm kind of a dilettante here. I teach a little bit in Aquinas Scholars and a little bit in Justice and Peace Studies, but I also open a gymnasium every morning at 6 a.m., so I like diversity of experience. I am a complete and total poetry nerd, I confess, however. The reason for this poem is its author, Daniel Carlson. He wrote The Beacon Light in one burst late at night, when he's the oldest friend I've ever had, by the way. That's how I know him. But he's a millwright in Washington and became a serious alcoholic, lost his family, lost his life, really lost everything. Woke up in the sweats and out of a nightmare and wrote this poem, discovered God, and stopped drinking. And just coincidentally, but seriously, just this morning, I found out by email from him this very day, April 29th of 2003, is his daughter's second year anniversary of sobriety also. So she's a recovering alcoholic too. And he wrote this poem, and the single most precious thing in his life today is that it's being read at the University of St. Thomas. So I will proceed and edit just a couple of paragraphs out in the middle that might be a little risque for St. Thomas. It's called The Beacon Light, and the metaphor is a guy on a ship that's breaking up all alone. Just as the ship that breaks the waves through a cold and windswept night, the jagged reefs and shoals we brave in search of the beacon light. From the bow and from the crow's nest, through the fog and through the gales, at the rudder I can take no rest as the weather attacks our sails. My hands grip tight the wooden wheel, my knees now weak and shaking. Each onslaught to the bow I feel, each wave the hull is taking. The masts all bear the storm's full weight, the booms and spars all creaking. I call out to the ship's first mate, but no one hears me speaking. No moon, no stars seen overhead, the swells upon us break, and send a groan from each bulkhead. How much more can she take? A hand gives me a cup of grog, I swallow hard and fast, to brave the cold and wind-blown fog, for this shall be my last. Our fate's the same, this ship and I, as I survey my life. We've endured much, though I shall die and leave my son and wife. To bear a witness of my days, but not to grieve, I think, for they'll not miss my cruel ways each night as I would drink. The legacy I leave behind, of which I cannot boast, the times that I was so unkind to those who loved me most, to my family and the friends who sustained me in my need, in compassion, but to what ends? In my selfishness and greed. And now the wind it beats me, the salt air stings my eyes, this cruel storm defeats me, no ears to heed my cries. And as my thoughts return to now, the fear my death at hand, I imagine calmer seas and somehow dream of firm dry land. The journey's been so very long, running low on life's provisions. The cold, thick mist and salt air now with night obscure my vision. Tugging hard upon my collar, up close around my neck, my feet so often slip upon the brine that coats the deck. The distant voice of my first mate from the stern I faintly hear, and then the voice of the boatswain's mate of a starboard reef we clear. With ice and wind taking their toll, pulling hard to the starboard side, across the port she slips a shoal with her instincts as her guide. I turn and peer to my right, my left, and far astern, and as I squint into the night, the truth of it I learn. My boatswain's mate I cannot see, the crew swept overboard. The ship's crew now consists of me, and perhaps, I pray, my Lord. I feel the rudder smash and tear, the wheel spins in my hand. A jolt and shudder grips the hull, the bow rips through the sand. The vessel rocks, the stern adrift, I hear a mighty groan. As timbers crack, I start to laugh, a madman dies alone. The boat now listing hard to port as I crash to my knees. Though I've not been a spiritual sort, I hear myself say, please. To the Father of my fathers, to whom my mother prayed, can you somehow be with me now, for I am so afraid. I lived a life of selfishness, though now please hear my prayer. I pray not for my life or soul, but for those for whom I care. My cruelty and hatefulness were all I had to give, and to those who knew me best, 'tis best that I not live. To those who, though very few, might grieve at my demise, show the error of my ways, as now seen through my eyes. Forgive me so that I might know my son and his sons after will think of thee, and perhaps then me, with tenderness and laughter. And with these words upon my lips, no time to say amen, the waves wash me into the sea, to never be seen again. And as I sink, in death I think, head bowed and knees still bent, I lift my head, knelt by my bed, a nightmare heaven sent. And ever since that frightful night when I found God's sweet grace, I follow fast his beacon light till we meet face to face.
I'm Rosemary Glitch, the Associate Director for Planning. And while most of the works today have been written by well-known authors, I wanted to introduce you to a lesser-known artist. I'm reading 315 by my mother, Catherine Barry Miklitsch. It is mid-afternoon. Great yellow whales dispense Pinocchios at every stop. In memory, it is always autumn. I stand and wait, a cup of coffee at hand. Perched on the counter, my 2-year-old watches for the promised siblings to emerge from the whale's belly. I am unsure, not quite prepared, to relinquish this moment of quiet, not ready to assuage the hurt heart ache or excessive joys of their young lives. Today, it is 3:15 as I stand, coffee in hand. Yellow whales pass me by as swiftly as 30 autumns took their leave. I pause, picturing each child from the Rockies to Portugal, and I wonder how each of their days has gone, and listen for their hurt heart or their joy.
I'm Bob Douglas, and I work in the physical plant. I'm the coordinator of central receiving and recycling. The good news is I have a short poem. I'm going to read a poem that comes from Wendell Berry, and I'll read a little bit just from the back of this collection about who Wendell Berry is. Wendell Berry is a Kentuckian who wrote and taught in California and New York before returning to the Kentucky River region, where he has lived for over 2 decades, writing and farming on 75 acres in Henry County. Mr. Berry has emerged as an eloquent spokesman for conservation, common sense, and sustainable agriculture, topics he's pursued in The Unsettling of America, The Gift of the Good Land, and Meeting the Expectations of the Land, which he co-edited with agricultural researcher Wes Jackson. He has also written of the Kentucky River country in his novels, including Nathan Coulter and A Place on Earth, and in the short story collection, The Wild Birds. His most recent novel is Jaybird Crow. He All of his novels are about a fictional but very real community, and he's one of the most eloquent writers I've ever had the privilege of reading. And he also calls himself the Mad Farmer. This poem is called Do Not Be Ashamed. You will be walking some night in the comfortable dark of your yard, and suddenly a great light will shine round about you, and behind you will be a wall you never saw before. It will be clear to you suddenly that you were about to escape, and that you are guilty. You misread the complex instructions. You are not a member. You lost your card, or never had one, and you will know that they have been there all along. Their eyes on your letters and books, their hands in your pockets, their ears wired to your bed. Though you've done nothing shameful, they will want you to be ashamed. They will want you to kneel and weep and say that you should have been like them. And once you say you are ashamed, reading the page they hold out to you, then such light as you have made in your history will leave you. They will no longer need to pursue you. You will pursue them, begging forgiveness. They will not forgive you. There is no power against them. It is only candor that is aloof from them, only an inward clarity, unashamed that they cannot reach. Be ready. When their light has picked you out and their questions are asked, say to them, I am not ashamed. A sure horizon will come around you. The heron will begin his evening flight from the hilltop.
Mine's also short, Bob. I'm Sister Margaret Wick, and I work in institutional research and planning. And a very long time ago, when I was a junior in high school, a very long time ago, we had a terrific teacher in American literature, and we studied, among others, Robert Frost. And I still remember the classroom I was sitting in when he read this poem to us. It meant a lot to me in my life then and many times since. It's by Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves, no step had trodden back. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.
I'm Doug Hennes. I work in university relations. I want to thank Margaret for reading that poem because I too had that same English teacher, I think, when I was in high school. I went to a very small high school in Owatonna, 40 kids, and we had that poem in the inset of our high school yearbook because we took a road less traveled, and it really did make a difference. I picked a poem by Eugene McCarthy, and for a pretty simple reason. One, when we were putting this program together, we were in a war, and I thought his reflections today about a different war might make some sense to people. Most of you weren't around when Gene McCarthy taught here at St. Thomas from 1946 to 1948 in sociology. He launched his campaign for the U.S. House from this campus. He was elected. He served 5 terms, and he went on to serve 2 terms as in the U.S. Senate, and then he ran for president in 1968 against the Vietnam War. I had the good fortune of meeting him in 1992. He's spoken at a number of St. Thomas events over the years, and we've become kind of distant friends of sort. And About 6 years ago, in fact, a documentary on his life was produced, and they shot a portion of it in the Leather Room here in the library, and that was about the time that this book of poetry came out. So here is a Vietnam Message by Eugene McCarthy. We will take our corrugated steel out of the land of thatched huts. We will take our tanks out of the land of the water buffalo. We will take our napalm and flamethrowers out of the land that scarcely knows the use of matches. We will take our helicopters out of the land of colored birds and butterflies. We will give back your villages and fields and your small and willing women. We will leave you your small joys and smaller troubles. We will trust you to your gods, some blind, some many-handed. Thank you.
I'm Michelle Filkins, and I work in the library in Minneapolis, the Keffer Library. I'm going to read a poem by Kirsten Durking, very talented local poet. She worked at the library, the O'Shaughnessy Library, for quite a few years, so some of you might know her. This poem was taken from the Poets Against the War website, and I don't know if any of you have visited that site, but it includes thousands of poems by local poets, national poets, and international poets, and regardless of how you feel about the war, I think that it does give a lot of very interesting perspectives on the situation. So this is what Kirsten had to say about that. January 2003. Every night a lethal story about the ice, slick, unstable, the lakes forming open holes of black water, cold liquid shaded the color of winter night. So many are rushing toward it, always amazed when the landscape wavers, always surprised when the frigid water won't let go. Tonight on TV, the president tells us the State of the Union, words in the language of freezing lakes, threats with the footing of shifting snow. So many cheering for war, applause like the crack of rotten ice under our feet. Thanks.
We just about made it. Thanks to all the readers. We will see you again next year, and it's going to be a beautiful sunny day.